Let's talk about how did you decide you wanted to start working abroad and how did that all come about?
Yes, I totally love this question. Hi, everyone. My name is Jen. So nice to meet everyone. I am a self-care coach and also a physical therapist that actually left my 9 to 5 job back in California. So I'm originally from California, currently living in Thailand, Chiang Mai. So it's 4 a.m. over here too. So good morning and good evening to everyone. But yeah, so what really inspired me to like work abroad in Chiang Mai as a self-care coach was really ultimately leaving, like recognizing that the 9 to 5 was not really for me. I absolutely love physical therapy, but the 9 to 5 grind was really difficult in terms of like for my mental health, and it created some chronic stress within my mind and body, and so that for me was not the way I wanted to live. I had lived in a monastery right before that for about 3 months, and I could see the total difference within the mindfulness space and also the 9 to 5 work grind. And that's when I realized there's nothing wrong with me. It's like the work culture that I didn't want to be a part of. And so that really inspired me to pursue 100% my self-care coaching career as an entrepreneur. And that's something I absolutely love to do, help women come out of those moments of chronic stress, come out of those moments of making decisions that are misaligned within themselves, and to ultimately stop the striving for the success in the external or the future, and to kind of take a look at where they're actually coming from. And for me personally, this driving comes from my Asian American background of never feeling enough and wanting to prove to my parents, which ultimately did lead me to go into grad school, which was an authentic in a way, because what I actually wanted to do was to travel and travel abroad and work abroad and teach English. Like a couple years ago or maybe 5 years ago when I started grad school. So ultimately, that kind of led me to my journey, just experiencing chronic stress within that 9 to 5 workspace.
That's totally fair. And it's one of those, it's not me, it's definitely you moments. So I'm glad
Yeah,
you were
no,
able to recognize that and find a change for yourself.
yeah.
And sorry, I totally forgot that it was 4 a.m. for you as well, Jen. So thank you so much for waking up or staying up for us.
No, 100%. No, I absolutely love being here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Mia, I'll ask you the same question. How did you start and decide you wanted to start working abroad?
Yeah. I think for me, working abroad is actually a function of the work I wanted to do. I think for many of us, our parents grew up very differently than we did. And I heard many, many stories about poverty in the circumstances that my parents grew up in. And even as a young child, I was never really able to understand why I had a stable roof over my head, always food on the table, had my own bed in my own room, all of these things that my parents never had. And I know there's a lot of people living on this planet who grew up right now the same as my parents did. And so I work in global health. Working, I think, effectively in global health requires you to be in person where the work is happening. So back in 2018, I did a fellowship that had me placed in the Ministry of Health in Malawi. I lived and worked there for 2 years. Then COVID hit, we evacuated. I lived in Liberia for a year, that was 2021. And then for 2022, I've been a bit all over the globe, working some in Malawi, working remote for a contract still in Malawi, etc. And so, yeah, I think for me, like working abroad is a function of the life and the impact that I want to have. And so it's kind of not, it's a choice of career and less a choice of location for me.
Thank you. And it's, yeah, those, it's important to recognize the work you're doing, definitely, and the little things that we take for granted every day, the little things. So thank you. Lucy, why don't you share a little bit about your experiences?
Yes. Hi, Justin. Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy, and it's so interesting to hear everyone's different stories. It's so inspiring. So yeah, I mean, I am originally from South Korea, so my story might be a little bit different. So I always have been dreaming to work in North America or work in Europe or Singapore, etc. So it has been my dream since I was young. So after university, I worked in Korea for a couple of years, and then, okay, now is the time to work abroad, experience new things, explore new cultures. So then I decided to move to Singapore. Yeah. So, and then like from there, I moved to Amsterdam in the Netherlands. And then I moved to Canada and settled down in Canada in 2018. So yeah, so for me, working abroad really opened my new perspectives and then really like experience different cultures, because Korea is a very homogeneous country where probably like 90% of populations are Korean. So I didn't really grow up like experiencing so many different cultures and stuff like that. So yeah, like that was kind of my main motive to really like go out there, experience different cultures. And yeah, and then I worked in tech for past 8 to 9 years. And then in 2021, I decided to do my own thing. And then now I'm a global career strategist and basically helping other people also want to work abroad and explore different cultures. So yeah, that's my story.
On the topic of being able to work and travel abroad, one of the best ways to get a job abroad and work remotely is to continue upskilling. Thanks to Careerist for partnering on this video. If you want to work in tech but don't have a technical background, Careerist will help you and teach you everything you need to know to help you land a well-paid job. Graduates are already working in 1,000+ companies. They also get access to a simplified job search system, the job application service. It helps find relevant job openings and accelerates the job application process by up to 5 times. You will get to attend live classes and also watch the recordings after each lesson. You get one-to-one guidance from a personal mentor. You get to try your hand at an internship. You get support at all stages of the program until your victory. For graduates, the average time to get a job in tech is about 2 to 4 months if you follow the job search instructions. Don't miss this opportunity to start earning 65 to 100K in just a few months. Follow the link in the description below and get a 10% discount for a course of your choice. Now, back to the webinar.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lucy. We'll be chatting later because I'm going to be looking for work globally. So we'll chat after. And Emily, tell us a little bit about your experience working abroad.
Yeah, I think my love for wanting to be abroad, or my interest in wanting to be abroad, kind of stemmed when I was a child. I think growing up Asian American, like the knee-jerk reaction is to kind of, I don't want to know Mandarin. I don't want to go to Saturday Chinese school. I didn't think it was cool. I like completely threw away that identity. Like I would skip Saturday Chinese school eating like goldfish in the bathroom with my friends, and I just did not learn Mandarin. But funnily enough, like when I grew up, I was like, it sucks that I can barely speak Mandarin. I don't know much about Taiwan or just my background in general. And for those who don't know, there's a program called Taiwan Love Boat, which I met Justine and Mia actually from that program. It's government funded. They send you to Taiwan to learn about the culture. And then in college, I went to Peking University to learn Mandarin for a year, and it was the best experience. And then during the pandemic, I wanted to take a gap year off to travel and just decompress from working in tech and startups. Found myself in Singapore and was like, I really like it here and I'm going to stay here. So I fought and found an EP, and I was living in Singapore for 3 years and now I'm back. But I think ideally it was just more of like chance and luck, a lot of luck, and an interest in being overseas in Asia. So I think a lot of it has been like me trying to understand my own identity and trying to kind of navigate my life through these different experiences, which we can share more later. But yeah, that's how I worked abroad.
Thank you, Emily. I was right there with you at Chinese school. I was copying off my seatmate and not paying attention at all as a kid.
lot of
I
it.
totally understand. I think a lot of people might be interested in learning more about maybe the resourcing side of how to find work abroad. Maybe that's like a good topic we can jump into. And Emily, do you mind starting us off with that? How you
Yeah.
found your work in Singapore?
Yeah. So I can speak specifically to Singapore and maybe just Asia in general, but I'll speak more to Singapore. I think for me, it was really just more around like networking. Like, I think the best thing you can do is like find the kind of people that already have your job and like continue doing like these like coffee chats, reach out to them, plug yourself into like overseas networks, like community people who have worked abroad in Singapore or back in the States. Like, I think it's good to surround yourself with people who've done it before just to learn their experiences. But for me, it was a lot of networking. Like, I had maybe like 25 different coffee chats when I was just visiting Singapore on a tourist visa. And I eventually found my job through that. But I have like a whole like resource hub and like list of things that you can do. So if you're interested, I can send them to you. But I think this, honestly, this day and age, especially in Asia, it's a lot around like networking and like who you know. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. And I'm sure folks will definitely want to see your resources and what you've got planned. And that's great. Thank you. Lucy, I'm sure you have lots to share on this topic.
Thanks, Justin. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with Emily as well. Networking is definitely one of the key things we can do to find a job abroad. I think like for me, so when I first tried to find a job in Singapore, I just literally just applied online. I was a little bit lucky, to be honest. And then I got a job when I was living in South Korea and applied for a job. At that time, I was working in airline company, hospitality, and then I wanted to transition into tech. So I was kind of lucky, to be honest. And then in Singapore, when I was like, changing to another role, I realized that, like LinkedIn is so powerful. That's when I kind of like optimize my LinkedIn profile so that like I don't have to like constantly apply for jobs, like outbound strategy, instead of just like, letting recruiters and hiring managers like reach out to me instead of me applying for jobs. It's like, time consuming, energy consuming, just applying for a job every single day. So that's how I kind of like changed my jobs in Singapore. And when in the Netherlands, obviously, like I applied for jobs, but like, that's how I got jobs. In Canada, I did it same as Emily. I did a lot of coffee chats, and I did attend a lot of networking events. I think like North America is a culture thing as well. I don't know, but a lot of people are eager to do coffee chats, and they are willing to accept having a coffee chat with us. So that's how I didn't get a job through coffee chats from my case, but I did like expand my networks and get some advices. I think it's really, really helpful to hear from them. But in Canada, I signed up for this AngelList. It's a tech kind of startup community, and there's a job board as well. So like my hiring manager reached out to me through there. So basically the same kind of strategy that I use LinkedIn and inbound kind of strategy. So I think like there are many different strategies and approaches that we can take to get a job abroad. I mean, if someone is really great at networking and socializing, I mean, that's, having a coffee chat and attending networking events is really great. But if you are someone who is a little bit more introverted, or maybe like not really feeling like, doing coffee chats so much, then, maybe like, optimize your LinkedIn profile or using different resources could be, working better for you. Everyone is very different in my opinion, but I mean, that's that's my answer, my story.
And you're right. Everyone should lean into where their skill set, where their strengths are, right? So in whatever they're most comfortable with, and that can really help them as well. So that totally makes sense. Mia, I think you can share a different perspective because you were saying you found and moved through almost like necessity. And so in terms of that, was it the job found you and then chose your location for you, or how did that come about?
I think generally my contracts have been I found the right job and the job picked the location for me. I think that's a pretty common thing that you'll find in development. I think, like talking broadly about how to get into development, To be fully honest, it's a field that a lot of people want to break into. And it's not the easiest to break into. There's really, I think, primarily one of two paths. One, you either come in through elite networks. You're either coming from kind of a big consulting or iBanking background, or you're coming from like an Ivy League type school, where you have the credibility through a lot of the big foundations and networks to enter the field. Or you have to be willing to accept very little pay comparative to Western standards for your first role. And there's plenty of programs like that. Things like Peace Corps, Princeton in Africa, Princeton in Asia. I did a fellowship, I guess, that kind of combined both. It was a little bit elitist and it's comparatively little pay. And I say it's comparatively little pay because on the ground, you're still paid far more than an average person. I was paid about 650 US a month. And I wasn't really saving anything for retirement, but was living very comfortably in my first year. I think those are the primary two routes because most organizations are pretty hesitant to hire people who haven't lived in a low-income country before. They want to know that you have the soft skills needed to live and work there effectively. And they want to know that you have and can demonstrate things like flexibility, resilience, adaptability. Living and working in a really different culture is, I think, a pretty different skill set than just traveling there. And honestly, a lot of people leave after the end of their first year. And so I think if you're looking to move into development, it's most beneficial to both have some sort of evidence that you've navigated living in such an environment before, A, and B, already have like the skill sets and experience domestically that people want to see internationally. And that's kind of what worked for me. It wasn't really planned this way, but I knew in college I wanted to be in global health. Basically, a number of experiences convinced me I needed actual skills before I took up that space in that room. I worked in health policy in San Francisco for a year and a half. And then the role came up. It was a perfect fit, like experience-wise. So I had demonstrated the skills to be able to do the job well in the Malawi Ministry of Health. And that's how I got my first role. And then honestly, after you get your first role and you can demonstrate that you did well, you're in very high demand. And most of my friends cannot hire for the people that they're looking for. So it's just getting that first job.
Thank you. And yeah, for those who are interested in the same field that Mia is in, she's clearly a wealth of knowledge. So definitely message her with any questions. And Jen, I also love that you can provide a different perspective as well on this question because you're carving the path of like a more entrepreneurial way of working abroad, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, so as a self-care coach and basically in the wellness field, how I got started was ultimately when I was in my 9 to 5 job. I was really taking a look at what were the options, and so and I also did coffee chat. So I looked at other entrepreneurs and coaches that were doing something similar to what I was doing. And we actually, she became my coach. And I actually met her in Thailand, super cool. But yeah, so ultimately, like, basically, I would recommend definitely reaching out to those that are living the life that you want to live, and basically reach out to those people first. And I guess also if there are people that are not really sure what they want to do, maybe take a look at the life that they are currently living, potentially their 9 to 5, etc., and taking a look at that. and seeing what they actually want, seeing what they like and what they don't like, kind of evaluating that, and seeing what kind of job that they do want, and then going from there and kind of reaching out to people that are kind of in some similar fields. But yeah, in the wellness field here, it's actually when I've like there's actually a lot of opportunity like in Chiang Mai. It's like basically a wellness hub, holistic hub, and in other areas in Thailand as well. In Bali, you guys all know. Yeah, Koh Phangan is another like hotspot, like for like all these holistic healers, coaches, etc. And there's actually a lot of opportunities to work and to spread your work like in the external world as like a coach, healer, whatever you want to identify as. So like for me, like I've hosted a lot of workshops with like authentic connection or dream manifestation, etc. Stuff like that. But there's like a lot of opportunity to do that and to spread your work outside. And that's something that I didn't realize until I came here. So for me, it's almost like sometimes you go to certain locations that like resonate. And for me, like Chiang Mai is such a great like place, has so much amazing people. Like community here is it's so easy to make friends and like a lot of like-minded individuals. And so yeah, it's just so much opportunity just kind of opened up like just being in this location. So yeah, that's kind of like where I'm at in my advice for people that are interested in the wellness field.
That's awesome. It sounds like you've situated yourself in a great place for where you're at right now, which is wonderful to create your community and create your network. That's wonderful. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I think we're going to do one more question with the panelists, and then we'll leave some time for Q&A. And I think everyone has talked a little bit about culture. So maybe let's talk a little bit about culture shock, because for all of you, you've experienced moving from one culture and living in another. So we can talk a little bit about how that culture shock impacted you and if you experienced it at all or how you navigated it. And Jen, you can start us off.
Sure. Yeah. So being in Asia actually for me, it's quite funny, but like I mean, I feel like many of you guys will probably resonate with this too. But growing up in America, like as Asian American, like there's this feeling of difference and almost like this whole lifelong kind of journey of like being Asian in a like predominantly white country, and so being in Asia actually, I feel like quite safe being here, especially in Thailand. And I'm sure it'll be different in different locations, but there's this feeling of it's actually quite nice for me because I can blend in with the foreigners, because I'm a foreigner as well, but also blend in with Asians too. And so for me, it was actually quite easy and it's quite comfortable being here and living here. And so I really do like that aspect. But in other places, such as Puerto Rico, where I did work also, like last year, like there were times where I was the only Asian and only American also, and like predominantly kind of like older generation Puerto Rican community. And so it was quite hard and isolating at those times where I just feel alone and I'm not really connecting because of the language barriers and stuff like that. And so if I were to tell my like inner child or past self anything, I would probably tell her to really connect and like to put yourself out there in order to create those connections with foreigners, because I know in some places it might be difficult to actually create that connection. So it's like really taking that initiative to create your own community, to start making friends, and to put yourself out there.
Totally true. And to your point, actually, about like having a really easy transition into moving into Chiang Mai, I think we have this connotation that culture shock is always a bad thing, but it can shock you in weird and wonderful ways as well, which is also great. So it's wonderful to hear that it's been a wonderful transition for you. Mia, for yourself, how did you experience culture shock when you moved?
Yeah, I think because I knew I was moving from the US to sub-Saharan Africa, there's definitely expectation of culture shock. And I think the expectation of that and a program that helps you effectively prepare for that mitigates the shock part a lot. Honestly, I feel far more culture shock when I've been out of the US for a while and I go back and I'm like, oh, wow, Costco and big box stores and like the size at which people purchase things in the US. I have experienced far more culture shock coming back to the US than I have elsewhere. But yeah, I think a lot of advice similar to Jen. Definitely befriending locals helps you, like, through their stories and experiences, you start to understand the culture a bit more, and the norms and like generational stories embedded nationally in the psyche, like about what shapes a place, especially for a place like I moved to Liberia, where they've had 20 years of civil war in the past decade. They've had Ebola. That type of trauma seeps into the society and all of your cultural norms. And if possible, the more you understand that before you step on the ground, consuming media, whether books or movies or whatever, to get a feel of the history, I think will help. But also, like, this is common advice, but not to pigeonhole anything. And there's always complexity and nuance and diversity of experience, even within a country. I think, honestly, if you can find someone that you can trust from the culture and be like fully honest and vulnerable and just say, hey, like, I know I'm new to this country. What norms have you seen that expats have really violated that you would advise me not to? That question I asked of, managers, like colleagues that I trusted, etc. And that, I think, helped me avoid a lot of pitfall. Sorry, it's early. Avoid a lot of landmines. And then I think the last thing that I would advise is, I think similar to Jen, just find similar people who are arriving at the same time, and make friends with them. And you'll be going through kind of surprising things together and unexpected things together. And you can help each other, like, feel validated that you're like, whoa, this happened. And they're like, yeah, this happened too. And get kind of context, understanding, figure out how to navigate differences. And I think, honestly, the biggest thing is, once you're kind of comfortable in a country, you kind of forget about the culture shock and cultural humility. And I know I think most people, you get frustrated with different cultural norms, and it's actually far more important 6 months in, 9 months in, 12 months in, to remind yourself that you're working in a different culture and there's going to be different ways of being and living and working, and to just regularly check yourself and remind yourself on that. And I think that will mitigate frustrations.
Thank you. And yeah, I think anytime you travel or work abroad, it's about learning about the new cultures, and then also you gain so much new perspective. And so it's really important to do a little check-in with yourself as well, to see where you're at and how you're feeling about things. Lucy, I'm sure, I love that you have the perspective of coming to North America rather than the opposite. Tell us a little bit about the culture shock you experienced.
Yes, I love to. So coming from South Korea to live abroad. So in terms of work, like, for example, I'm not sure if anyone would resonate with me, but like in Korea, we kind of like, in the working environment, we kind of like, not worship is not the right word, but like, we think that working until late in the office or working really hard is something that we are so proud of. I don't know, proud of is something that is the right word, but like, if you work until late, it's kind of like a norm. It's like not everyone, but like most companies do expect you to work until late, and they provide dinner in the office as well sometimes. So like, coming from the kind of culture, well, my company at the time was not like that, but like usually like most of the companies like that. coming from that kind of culture to work in Singapore, Netherlands, and Canada, I realized that, oh, wow, actually working until late is not something that I kind of should be proud of. It's something that like, you know, because like I realized that a lot of other cultures, you know, kind of like expect you to be more productive in your work and not really think that working until late is something that, wow, you did so, wow, you're doing so great job because you're working until late, something like that. So it's something that, it was a culture shock for me when I first arrived in Singapore, because I'm coming from that kind of culture, because I was expecting, oh, like if I work until late, people will, I don't know, think that like I'm such a good employee, etc. So that's the first kind of like culture shock that I had. And another one, when I moved to the Netherlands, it's a good culture shock in a way. Again, coming from, I think, Asian culture where it's kind of like very competitive, and then like work becomes sometimes your life as well. But then in the Netherlands, people do actually care about your mental wellness. And I was very happy. Like at that time, it was like 2016 when I moved to the Netherlands. And now I know that like mental wellness arises like in everywhere. But at that time, people don't really talk about burnout. People don't really talk about their mental wellness that openly. But in Amsterdam, like the burnouts was like a lot of people are openly talk about. And then people really take their mental wellness very seriously at the time. So it was like, wow, like it really opened my eye. So that was another kind of good culture shock that I had. In Canada, so I moved to Toronto. So Toronto is very like such a diverse city. So I agree with Mia as well on this note, because, you know, it really helps for me to, it helped me to kind of like surround myself with like people who also moved to Canada at the same time and navigate through together, because if without them, I don't know how I would adjust to a new culture very fast. But like, I guess like Toronto itself, like is such a diverse city. It really helped me to, you know, adapt to a new culture very fast. But at the same time, I was surrounded myself with so many international friends. So we were kind of like chat about like certain things, and then like we just go through together. So yeah, that's my experience.
Thanks for sharing, Lucy. And yeah, it's I'm glad that we're shifting now. The trend is to stop glorifying hustle culture. I'm really glad about that. So it's a good shift. Emily, did you experience any culture shock when you moved to Singapore?
Yeah, I think for me, it was not really culture shock, but more so the realization of like how much privilege I had. So for context, in the US, like I would be considered a minority, right? I'm like Asian, whereas if you go to somewhere like Singapore, if you're Chinese or you look Chinese, you're Chinese Singaporean, you're considered the majority. And it was interesting because for someone who was, I guess, like Americanized, like coming to Singapore, I felt like you had a lot more benefits for, you know, whether it's like even having an American accent. They're like, wow, like you're so interesting. And, you know, you must come from a good school, you must have international experience. So they kind of, not that they glorify you, but I think there was a set of like different treatment compared to like me to like maybe someone who had come from like another country in Southeast Asia. So I think that was really eye-opening because I've never been part of the majority or ever had that privilege. And so I think for me, when I talk to my other friends who came from like India or like other neighboring countries, that really opened my eyes, and it made me want to help them more, or like understand like, you know, what their life was like. I think the second part was moving to Singapore made me realize like maybe I didn't want to live in US my entire life anymore. I thought I would, you know, buy a home here, have kids here, and like stay here until that, you know, until I die. But with the current situations happening in the States with like gun control, as we've seen with like the Lunar New Year in Monterey Park, like it's chaotic. And it made me realize like places like Singapore, where it's clean, you know, law-abiding citizens. I mean, yes, they have their own internal political issues as well, but it's not to the extent of the US. And I think that just made me realize like I could live elsewhere and I don't have to stay in the US. So think that was really eye-opening and makes me kind of sad. So for context too, I'm actually going to Taiwan in 3 days, and I'm gonna consider Taiwan maybe as like a place to move and live. So I wouldn't say culture shock, but a lot of like, life changes because I had tried living elsewhere. And I think the last thing I would say is like being an American in Asia made me realize like how individualistic we are and how we always think like the American way is the only way. And I was like, no, there are a lot of other ways too. So yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah.
Very eye-opening experiences. I'm glad. And you don't always know what you're looking for when you're traveling in terms of, oh, sorry, the sun is right in my eyes. You don't know what you're going to find when you have these travel experiences. So it's always a surprise.